To have the life of your dreams, you have to pick and choose your battles. You might have heard before, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. Maybe you've been told to burn the boats, just pick a lane and leave the rest behind. You might think you can have one or the other, but you can't have it all. You can be healthy, or you can have a thriving business. You can have a family, or you can be successful in your career. But what if life isn't about choosing either or, but instead choosing and? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton. I help anyone who feels stuck, stagnant, or burned out in life to create positive life change in ways that stick forever. It's that easy. Sigmund Freud said, "Maturity is the ability to live with ambiguity." And one of the realities of life is that nothing is certain. So being able to go with the flow, to roll with the punches, as they say, is one of the most valuable life skills that you can have. And that's what Tiffany Sauder is all about. Tiffany is a mom of 4 who also runs 3 businesses, alongside her husband, who is also a successful professional. With so much on her plate, Tiffany decided that she wanted to have it all. Now, after building her abundant life, she's here to teach you to do the same. In this episode, Tiffany and I discuss what it means to have a life of and. What to do when what's been working for you is no longer working. How to get out of a reactive state and more into a proactive way of living. How to deal with self-care guilt. And what Tiffany learned as an entrepreneur that helped her as a mom, and the other way around. If you're a parent, if you're an entrepreneur, or if you're just a busy human who wants more out of life, this is the episode for you. So please enjoy this conversation with Tiffany Sauder. What is life of and?
Yeah, as young as I can remember, as a little girl, just had this attitude and energy of, I just want to say yes to things. I want to go to more parties. I want more friends. I want a big family. I want to travel a bunch. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to get married. I just want to do all the things. And that works for a season in life. And then you start to get married, and my husband and I have 4 kids, and I have businesses that I've committed to. And you start to realize, like, man, capacity actually is finite. You have got to figure out how you're going to solve in a different way. And I think a lot of us who now have decided that, to start a podcast or to share our stories with the world, there's kind of became this moment where what you were doing did not work anymore. It was not serving who you wanted to become. And I hit that wall about 7 years ago. Not just me. My husband and I, our marriage got to a really difficult spot. I was not living in a way that was aligned with my values as it related to the time I was spending with my kids. And I felt like I was constantly behind, constantly overwhelmed, constantly living in this like state of guilt. I was like, I am too smart for this to be my life for the next 20 plus years. There's no way I've worked this hard to get a job, to have a family, to do all the things I sort of thought I wanted, and then for it to suck. There's no way that's what life is about. And so I remember laying in bed and thinking, I have a choice to either give back some of the things that I want to life. Like, do I need to pick a career or being a mom? Do I need to pick, is it a life of or is it a life of and? And I decided that I could exchange my dreams, or I could exchange my toolbox and figure out, how do I change my tools so that I can live at a different level, find capacity in a different way, and function in our life of and, our 2-career household, our 4-kid, our brand of crazy. I wanted to be able to live in a way where I was present. It was peaceful. I loved it. Most of the time I looked forward to waking up into my life. And so, yeah, I've spent the last, 5 years or so kind of reorienting and replumbing our lives so that we can get out of this reactive state and into a more proactive state of living.
I love all of that. Reactive versus proactive, or proactive instead of reactive, to me sums up everything about what we want out of life. If I had to boil everything down to one key thing of what makes people disappointed, upset, sad, depressed, and everything bad that comes along with life, it's living in a place of reactivity. And everything that is good that comes in life of happiness, of joy, of the feelings that we want, comes from being proactive and making a conscious decision rather than letting life happening to us. But you said that that obviously wasn't automatic, and you have a lot on your plate. You have kids, you have the business, you have the relationship. So what were some of the things at first when you first started to make this transition? Because as you said, capacity is finite. So what are there some of the things you had to add to your toolbox to make this a reality?
Well, I think it starts with mindset. I mean, you do health coaching. And so I think it starts on the inside first, and then your time starts to align to your beliefs because our behaviors are a function of our beliefs. And I think that one of the things I had to accept is that it all sucks and it's all hard.
Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds. But right now, I have to tell you about the free Change Made Easy private Facebook community. If you want to join hundreds of change seekers just like you and get free trainings, resources, and direct help from me in order to help make your quest for change easy, then click the link in the show notes that says Facebook group now. You'll be directed to my private Facebook group that I created just for clients and listeners of this podcast. And as a bonus, you'll get a free hour-long training on eliminating self-sabotage. All you have to do is click Facebook group in whatever podcast app you're listening on right now. Okay, let's get back to the show.
And I don't say that as a way to make people grumpy about life, but I started to realize, like, man, this is really freaking hard to live in this reactive state. It's also really hard to plan every single week. It's also like really annoying to decide ahead of time on Saturday what it is that we're going to eat next week. It's also like really annoying to food prep healthy vegetables, but it's also really annoying to feel like dog crap when you realize like you just ate half a bag of Doritos because you didn't have anything within arm's reach that was going to feed your body. And so I just started seeing, like, oh my word, getting up at 5 in the morning is like really annoying to work out. And it's also really annoying to feel crappy in my clothes. It is a lot of work to stay married. It's also a lot of work to get divorced. Like it is really hard to be a mom. If you want kids, it can also be very painful to not be able to be a mom. Owning my own business is like really hard. Working for somebody else is like also really hard. And I started to realize, no, I think the secret to life is actually deciding your brand of hard and choosing that into your life versus like what you're saying, this like kind of reactive recipient of whatever happens to fall into the day, into your time. And I just started to realize like, oh, it takes some force to decide what is going to take your time. It takes some force to put into your schedule this like proactive planning and these tools that keep us in our household organized and aligned. But I will choose that force when I put it against the reactive force where you start to feel like an aluminum can inside of your life and everything else just compressing the life out of you. And you're like, this is not how I want to live.
Yeah, so well put. It's a cliche at this point, but it's like choose your hard. This is hard, that is hard. We have to choose. But I like that you said decide on your brand. It's all about what's worth it to you. I'm curious,
Mhm.
one of the words that you used before was guilt. And I know this is a thing, as you said, I've been a health coach as a personal trainer. I worked in a gym for almost 10 years, one on one. And a lot of my clients were moms, wives, some working, some stay at home. But mom guilt, I know, is a real thing. And this is for dads too. But anyone who, especially parents, have other responsibilities, it then becomes very hard to focus on the things such as fitness or eating healthy, or maybe even a date night with your husband when you have four other kids. So, how do you start to deal with the guilt that comes along with taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I love this question. So my day job, I guess you could say, is as a marketer, a brand strategist. And so in that world, you like you're taught to think about words really hard because words matter and it's the power of communication and human behavior and all these things. And so I have my definition for guilt, or no, sorry, my definition for balance, and I'll get to guilt, I promise. My definition for balance is when your decisions and behaviors are completely aligned with your priorities, what you want to become, and your values, who you want to become. So, balance is when your decisions and behaviors are entirely aligned with your priorities and your values, what you want to become, and who you want to become. And so, when you're in decisions or in behaviors that are not aligned with those things, especially if they're not aligned with your values and they're not aligned with your priorities, then that is where guilt sets in. And so I started to say, I would sometimes feel guilt because I thought I was supposed to. Meaning, if I am a working mom, that I am not part of the club, if I don't say at least once a week, wow, I feel so guilty for not being there for my kids, dot, 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 dot. Wow, I feel so guilty that I had to leave early this morning and not get them on the bus. And somebody asked me, do you really feel guilty? Like, actually, do you really wish that you could make a different choice? And I was like, my face went white and I was like, the true answer is no, I don't feel guilty. The true answer is I chose these things. The true answer is that I believe that these motions and decisions and behaviors are in the best interest of my kids because it keeps me whole and full, and it creates an earning opportunity for our family that I think can change their futures. That is the honest answer. But does that make me not part of the club if that's really what I believe? And so I think one question for working parents who are listening to this is it actual guilt or is it guilt because you feel like you're supposed to? I do think there's healthy guilt sometimes where it is a sign to us that we are making decisions that are not aligned with our priorities and our values. And I'll give you an example in our household. My husband and I have learned during the school year, during the school week, if we both travel for work, the amount of pressure that it puts on our kids and them, like the planets stop orbiting the sun. Like things all fall apart. And that is pursuing our priorities at the expense of a value that we have as a family. And that's too far, we've learned. It's too much for our family. It's too much for our kids. It's too much for keeping us in balance. That does not mean that we never travel. That doesn't mean that there are never times that we're away. But we have learned that stretching the rubber band that far is too much on the kids, and it sets our family up such that we're compromising a value and we're pursuing our priorities too hard. But on the other hand, I will tell my kids, my goal is to live to be 102 years old. I had our last daughter at 40 years old. So I'm like, I have got to have a long runway of life here if I'm going to see all my grandkids. So I want to live to be 102. And one of the ways that I honor my commitment to wanting to be as a present for as long as possible in their life is that I have to take care of myself. And so there are times when my husband is traveling where my older girls will have to get my little girls up for school because I can't get back from the workout class that I like to do that is good for me socially and for my body. I'm back by 7 o'clock. I get kids on. And so I just explain to them, this is my priority. This is aligned with what I want to give you. I want to give you health. I want to give you me for a long time. I want to give you good things. And this is how I need your support so that we can stay in balance. And when I can articulate it to myself that way, that I'm doing this because it's a priority, I'm doing this because it's good for me and good for our family, it keeps me out of that guilt quadrant. It keeps me out of either feeling like environmentally I need to be in that guilt quadrant because that's where the party is, or a healthy guilt. It says like when I feel that way and I'm like, man, I made a call, I made a choice that was not who I'm becoming or what we're trying to do as a family, then I can learn from that and make a new choice next time.
So spot on there. So many good points. For anyone listening, and again, this isn't just with parents, because we can feel this about everything. Whenever we choose one thing over another, guilt can creep in. Sometimes it's work. Can I really afford to go to work out, to go grocery shopping when I have so much work to do, when I have to take care of my kids, when I have to show up for my spouse? But as you said, it comes back to values, and you said, like, I chose to do this, so I'm not going to be guilty about it. And I think that is the important part, again, going back into proactive versus reactive. Like, am I choosing this, or is it happening to me? And we see that when you live a life of choice, everything else falls into place, and you can feel good about your choices because you know that you're doing not only what's best for you, but what's best for you is also what's best for your kids. You just said, I want to be 102, not for vanity, but because I want to see all of my grandkids, and that's for everyone in your family. So a better Tiffany is better for the kids, better for your husband, better for everyone else. And it's a flip of, I think, the way a lot of people think of it, where they think that it's like, well, if all I think about myself, that's selfish. But I always flip it where I'm like, being selfish is actually selfless, because the best version of you is the best version for everyone else. And usually when you're trying to be quote unquote selfless, which you're doing everything for others all the time, you're doing for your kids, you're doing for your coworkers, you're doing for your husband, but you're never doing for yourself, that's actually selfish, because you're doing that from a place of not wanting to hurt, not wanting to feel bad about it, not wanting to feel guilty, not wanting to feel whatever things come from that. So I just really appreciate you putting it that way and like explaining balance the way you did, because I really like how you broke that down in terms of like living in alignment with your values. And values are something that come up a lot on this show. A lot of my guests, I talk about this a lot. And I'm curious how you look at values with yourself and with your family as a whole, and how you guys structure this to make sure that you're all living in alignment and moving towards your combined goals.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I do see them separately, and I would say that has been, a point of growth for me to be able to see that I am still a whole human being outside of my marriage and outside of my family identity as, like, a mom and a CEO and all this, like, I'm still a 100% whole human, and there may be choices that I make that my husband wouldn't make the same one, but that doesn't make mine wrong and vice versa. But it does have to work in harmony inside of a family unit so that there's alignment across the family. So I'll go back quickly to the priorities and values, and then I'll jump into this question specifically. One of the things I would encourage families to do, or even if you're, have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or something like that, is actually write down what your priorities and values are and share them with one another. I think we oftentimes leave these things to be very implied. But if our behaviors and decisions and choices and the way we're using our time and money are aligned to anything, it should be our priorities. And so when those are written down and you can revisit them and you can remind yourself, like, this is the mission that we are on right now as a team, as a couple, as a family, it really shuts down the like surprise game. So because everybody starts to say like, well, yeah, of course, this is what we're doing. This is a season of saving. This is a season of streamlining our outside commitments. This is a season of renewal for our family. This is like, what is the season right now that you're in? Because it starts to, I think it gets everybody starting from the same page on decisions and resource allocation. For values, it's the same thing. We each as a family, individually as people, have values. There's a lot of overlap, obviously, in places where of the impact we want to have on the world in our little nuclear family, but we have them individually. One of mine is be vulnerable. And that is a big part of who I am. It's a big part of the way that I show up in the world. I am an open book. You and I both turn on the microphone every single week and share things about our life. It's an important part, it's an important muscle in my life that I keep really active. My husband is a very private man. He is not a guy who goes to a party and says 10,000 words. And so I used to think that I needed to be quiet too, or he would not be comfortable with what I needed to say in our life. And we had to work through like, just because I'm vulnerable, that doesn't mean he has to be that same way. But we do have to get to a place where we can respect our natural tendencies. And I need to have boundaries in place so that he knows not everything that he does inside of our home or everything he says to me or everything that happens is going to automatically broadcast to the world, because that's unfair to him. And I also need to know I'm not going to be walking across like glass shards every single time when I do want to share something that I think other people can learn from inside of our family. So we've created a really explicit agreement about what that looks like so that I can still step into vulnerability and protect the fact that that's not how he wants to live his life, but he has in fact chosen to live it beside me. And so we're going to stretch each other a little bit. So there's things I would share if I was on the planet alone, because to me it's not that big of a deal. But in respect of him and that part of him, there are things I don't share because it would make him uncomfortable and I want to respect that. So that would be an example of like our values needing to coexist. It's not like I get to be who I am all alone because that's not what I've chosen. I've chosen to live a life beside this man. And I want to do that in a way that respects him, but also allows me to be who I am and continue to explore this vulnerability in this example.
Yeah, I mean, compromise is crucial in business, in relationships, and even with ourselves. There's infinite things to want, infinite things to strive for, and we live in a world of finite time and finite resources. So, to be able to give and take with others, with ourselves
Mhm.
all the time is a crucial skill. But in that world of finite resources with an abundance of things asking for our time, our energy, and our attention, it's easy to become overwhelmed. So I'm curious, with all that you have going on, how do you deal with the overwhelm in business, family, relationships, and everything else?
Yeah, I try to stay out of the overwhelm by understanding what is making me feel behind. And is it a systemic part of my life or is it a project? So, for instance, we oftentimes act surprised that every single time we all get home at night, everybody needs to eat. That's a systemic thing. We oftentimes act surprised that people need laundry done and socks folded and towels back in the bathroom. Like these are systemic parts of life. So one of the things I've done is put everything that happens always is on a system in our house. Just like getting invoices out every single month in your business is it's on a system. I have put things like laundry and food prep and grocery ordering and picking up our house and cleaning and the most ordinary things that happen always are on very defined systems, have very defined owners, and happened in a very defined way. Because I started to observe in my suburban world of I'm 40 years old, of kind of this like 35 to 55-year-old sprint of figuring out how to raise these crazy kids who need to go everywhere. In that world, we spent an extraordinary amount of our time managing the most ordinary parts of life. The lawn, the carpet, the laundry, the food, like all like it just picking up like this is consuming our existence. And I'm like, I'm gonna make this simple. I'm gonna make this automatic. I'm gonna make this a non-conversation in our house. Everybody understands what the expectations are, who's doing it, when it needs to be done by. I don't want this to be the basis of my existence as a mom or my relationship with you as my kid or my husband. So that is one is like everything that's systemic we have made it as simple as possible and it happens as automatically as possible. I can give some examples there. And then if I'm overwhelmed and it's a project season. So I just worked on a digital course, the Life of Ant Academy, and like it was a non-typical it was like a couple of big boulders in my work bucket that like didn't fit very well. And so I had to put in the little bit different hours, wake up some Saturdays, take my computer to some swim meets, just like scrunch it into my life. And I felt more reactive in that season than I like to feel. But I knew it was like a 4 month sprint. I could have got it done shorter if I would have been really willing to run faster. You talk about compromising with yourself. I just can't reach it in a shorter period of time. This is, I think, what we can get done. And I was like, it's a project overwhelm. It's not systemic overwhelm. But I think we allow systemic overwhelm to make that dictate the way that we exist in our everyday. And I hate that for American families.
Such a good point. Those little systemic things, I like the way you phrase that, are often so easy to do, but it's the easiest things that become the easiest also to ignore. The daily things of it's just laundry, it's just cooking, it's just whatever, yet somehow we don't get it done. And then so much of our
Mhm.
time, energy, and attention ends up going to these things that we know are going to keep coming up over and over and over. I used to say to my nutrition clients a lot, people used to say to me all the time, like, well, I'm pretty good with eating during the week, but then like on the weekend, things get out of control. And I'd be like, well, I'm going to tell you a secret. The weekend is always coming. So if you don't have a plan for
Mhm.
that, it's going to
Yep.
keep popping up. And if these things become a pattern,
Mhm.
that's where we really get get screwed. Like if something happens once,
Mhm.
it's a mistake, it's an anomaly. If something happens over and over, it's a pattern. And those are the things that I want to
Mhm.
help people break out of. So if you could give maybe one or two examples really tactically of the way you break things down in your household, whether there's chores or whatever, because I think that would be super helpful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this thing called the morning roundup and the evening wind down. Morning roundup, evening wind down. And I say I don't want to see yesterday. That's my saying in our household. I don't want to see yesterday. I don't want to see yesterday's dishes. I don't want to see yesterday's water bottles. I don't want to see yesterday's homework. I don't want to see yesterday's crafts. I don't want to see yesterday. Every day in our house brings a full cup of activity and things to do and go and people in our house. And so we have got to start fresh, just like a restaurant does. I say, like, when you walk down like a city street after the restaurants are closed, and the lights are out and everybody's gone, service is ready for the next day. The cereal or the silverware is rolled, the carpets are swept, everything's put down, the chairs are up, like the kitchen is clean, is ready for the activity of the next day. And so I think about our own household, and I'm talking about kind of the main traffic area. There's usually like 2 or 3 rooms that everybody really lives in. And I think about that. So the evening wind down, literally, I have a list of things that need to happen every night, just like we're a restaurant of sorts. The dishes need to be loaded into the dishwasher. The dishwasher needs to be ran. The kitchen and bathroom trash needs to be taken out. The countertops need to be wiped down with the stuff that I love that smells really good. A quick Dyson sweep, and backpacks need to be packed, and lunches need to be packed, and backpacks ready to go for the next morning. And I have a list of things, and it takes us probably 10 minutes to get it done. It sounds like a long list, but if you put on an Alexa timer and do the things that I just said, I'm telling you, it doesn't take that long. Running the dishwasher every single night before we go to bed is an absolute game changer, because in a big family, and I'm not even a big family, but in a big family especially, if the dishwasher is not clean for the next morning, then breakfast dishes go into the sink, and then the nanny and my 3-year-old, their lunch dishes get into the sink, and then dinner, and that just, because like you can never get ahead. And so those are things, that's an example, the evening wind down. And then the morning roundup is what happens in the morning. I'm a morning workout person, so that's kind of my time. I do more in the evening with my kids, but the morning is looking through backpacks and making sure that our like attendance folders are done. I will run through the agenda of the morning of like who's picking up, what's happening, kind of have like a 45-second family meeting. And so that's kind of what our morning looks like. But it's about putting away yesterday and starting fresh for the morning so that everybody is ready to rock and roll. I would say start there. And some of the other systems and things that I have put in place, I am a big fan of outsourcing laundry. There's a service called Poplin that for $1 a pound, for most families, it's about $25 a week. You can have most of your laundry done. And that is a way to get back 4 to 6 hours really, really quickly of something that's going to happen every single week. So those are two really practical ways that I get time back so that I'm not just reacting to messes, putting everybody's stuff away. We do like a 5-10 minute pick and put, which literally means like pick something up and put it away. And when we do that, we don't have 4 6-hour binge sessions, once a month where nobody can go anywhere, where I'm super pissed off and our house looks like a trash heap. Um, it's just like, I'm like, we're done with that. It's not what we're going to do anymore.
Yeah, those are great tips. I love the thought of I don't want to see yesterday, and thinking of it like a restaurant or a business being shut down. You wouldn't come into work the next morning and see the entire last night's shift didn't put anything away or didn't
Mhm.
get things ready, because then you're not able to start the day in the way that you would. And as you're
Totally.
saying this, it's because it's so obvious. It's just like, well, like you just kind of run it like a business, which makes sense. But it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning of like, yes, like all of the having that list of things sounds challenging and you have to do everything every night and clean up a little, but that challenge is so much better than the challenge of being frustrated with your kids, being frustrated with your spouse, fighting, or silently resenting them as you have to clean everything up or something like that. There's a saying in economics where there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that's true
Mhm.
in life too. Like nothing goes without consequences, nothing goes without its own repercussions. And I appreciate you mentioned the dishwasher, because you said if I don't load and run the dishwasher, Here's all of the things that happen. So for people listening, you can find those 1 to 2 key inflection points. These are
Mm-hmm.
in habit science, we call these cornerstone habits. What's the one habit that I have to do that makes everything else kind of
Mm-hmm.
cascade into place? Or the one habit that if I don't do, it will throw off the entire track of everything else for the rest of the day. So, as Tiffany just said, if I don't have the dishwasher run in the morning, then the sink gets overloaded, and then no one wants the blah, 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 blah. It's this whole thing. And all of a sudden, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, it's exploded. So, finding those things in your life that can let the change that you want to make be a little bit easier from one change that allows everything else to be easier, or conversely, the one thing that if you don't do, it's going to make everything else a lot harder, and then you can reverse engineer those things. So for you, Tiffany, how do you see this playing out in your career as an entrepreneur? Because obviously you have a lot of these organizational skills and a lot you've had to learn as a parent. So has that any of this helped you, or is there anything that you do differently as in your work life that's counter to what you do in your family life?
I think they're very aligned. I think I learned I think what I observed in my business was that structure supported scale. And I started to see, oh shit, we were scaling the hell out of our personal life. And we had no structure to scaffold that around. More kids, more boards, more professional pursuits, more investments, more people we were mentoring. I mean, my husband runs a company that's $1 billion in revenue. He travels 40 to 70% of the time. We have 4 kids in 4 different schools from 15 to 3 years old. Nobody can drive. I mean, it's like one of them's in travel sports. Like it was like, this is insane. We are scaling the complexity of our personal life and we have no structure for scaffolding. No wonder. And I think we live relationally bankrupt. And what if we had a balance sheet every single month that we like presented to each other as a family? Like it would really show sometime the leading indicators that our businesses show us like, holy crap, we made a little less money. We made a little less money. You get to see the black and white of your financial statements in your business. And I think and make corrections and adjustments and ask people for help. And we don't have that same visibility in our personal lives. And so I think I learned it in my professional life that I was scaling more successfully. I was creating capacity for myself more successfully. I was more creative in my professional life than I was in my personal life. My relationships were better in my professional life. I was like, but I didn't want to go home and it feel like I was in a business. But I started to tell myself, you got to choose your heart, honey. You got to choose your heart, honey. You got to choose your heart. And now these habits, I hardly see them. I hardly feel them. They're so much a part of our life and the way that we exist. And they've gotten so efficient and it really doesn't take that much time. And so I have my sewing machine right now, like on our dining room table, and I'm making Barbie clothes with our third kid. And I have like the time to go to my kids' tournaments and not be like, oh my word, I wish I need to get home. And tonight I'm going to be folding laundry till midnight. And like, I have space for the life I want. And that's the gift back. It's not that there aren't some things that suck. I have just love the things that suck because they create all this capacity for this extraordinary life that I have. So I've just made friends with it. I've made friends with the part that's hard, so that I can step into this space that is really this amazing life.
I'm so grateful that you shared that last piece right there. That to me is everything, because as you just said, like, oh, I was kind of afraid that if I took all of this stuff from my work life and brought it home, that I'd be like working at home, or I'd turn it into a job. And I think so many people have that thought around family, health, relationships, anything else, where they're just like, oh well, if I have to plan out what I eat, then it's like it's not fun anymore. Or if I just like to go to the gym and like feel through it, and like I don't want to have a workout plan, and it's just like, and if I do that, then it's going to become too hard, and it's just like all this stuff. And it's like, I get that side of it, but if you look at it from reverse,
Mhm.
I say a lot, everything is the same. And that's why I love having entrepreneurs like you,
Mhm.
because what we learn in entrepreneurship relates to health, it relates to business, it relates to relationships. So it's like, imagine you had a business and it failed, and someone said, well, what was your plan? And you were like, well, I was just kind of feeling my way through it. They're like, well, what were your goals? What were your achievables? What were you actually setting out to do? And you're like, well, like, no, I didn't do any of that stuff because like that would take away from it. Well, then of course you failed. Like that, like no one would think that you would succeed. And yet with our relationships, with our health, with literally anything else, we think that it's okay to just go like, well, yeah, like, no, I don't really have any specific deliverables or anything like that. And because we're afraid of that because it's going to make it not the thing anymore. Like it's not my family life if I make it too much into a business. But that's not true. As you just said so eloquently, like it allows you to do the things you love and to make friends with the hard part. I love that because it's like now it's like I don't have to push away from it or feel bad about it or feel guilty about it or anything else. I can feel good about doing the hard things because it is doing those hard things that allows me to have the time to sew Barbie dresses on Tuesday morning or whatever it is. So I really, really appreciate you sharing that because that's really the entire point of this podcast is to just show it's like the things that we have to do are the same across all areas of our life. It's and as we said already, like it's so simple, but simple does not mean easy. And that's kind of the thing that I want people to see. It's like none of this stuff is impossible. It's these, you didn't say anything about like, yeah, I had to tear everything down to the beginning and start from the studs. It's like, you're like, yeah, I kind of made a plan that kept things a little bit more organized and made some conscious decisions. So that's, the big takeaway. But I want to know, for everyone listening, Tiffany, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
I think it goes to what we've been talking about is how powerful do we become when we have a proactive pursuit of our talents and of our families and our relationships and our dreams? Like what happens to the world when we unleash that kind of energy and potential? And so, I felt so empty and small when I was not living in that space. And there's very little about my life that has changed. I'm married to the same man. I have the same company. I have just one extra kid. So it's like it doesn't need to have an environment change to create these changes. But it does take discipline, and it feels very different to live inside of this life than it felt 5 to 7 years ago. So I think that's what I want is for us to feel like for society to feel like I'm living in the space of my life. I'm living in it.
Love that. And if you had one action step that listeners could take right now today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, to start making the change that they're trying to make in their life just a little bit easier, whether it's a change in their health, their relationships, their business, but to make that change a little bit easier, what would that action step be?
For 6 weeks, outsource your laundry. I'm serious. I'm going to somehow have like a ticker symbol on my website someday of how many people I've convinced to stop doing their laundry. You are not uniquely qualified. It is not that expensive, and it will give you 4 to 8 hours back to do the things that you want, to work out, to have more time to plan, to be more intentional, to go to the park with your kids, to be intimate with your partner, whatever it looks like. Like we all have the same list of things that aren't getting done. Stop doing your laundry for 6 weeks and see what's better in your life. You can outsource it to Poplin. You can find a laundromat to do it. You can hire somebody off of Nextdoor. I'm telling you, you're not uniquely qualified.
I won't lie to you, this episode was huge for me. Directly after recording this, I reached out to my partner to start implementing some of Tiffany's advice. What Tiffany said about having a family value system, as well as leaving the day behind with a nighttime shutdown routine, are great actionable tactics that can work for any family, couple, or even just a single person. So take that action today. Make a small change that's going to make your life a little bit easier, even if it's as simple as outsourcing your laundry. That is change made easy. And be sure to check out everything Tiffany has going on at her website, TiffanySauder.com, which I've linked to in the show notes as well. Don't forget about the free Change Made Easy private Facebook community. Come join hundreds of change seekers just like you and receive free trainings, resources, and direct help from me that will help make your quest for change easy. Just go into the show notes of whatever app you're on right now and click the link that says Facebook group. you'll be directed to my private Facebook community that's just for clients and listeners of this podcast. And as a bonus, you'll get a free hour-long training on eliminating self-sabotage. All you have to do is click Facebook group in whatever app you're listening on right now.